Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Bonjour, good morning, good afternoon. Your Excellency, the Vice President of Nigeria representing President Tinubu, Your Excellency, former President of Nigeria, Olusegun Obasanjo, Baba, Excellency Amina Mohammed, Dr. Darren Walker, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Shishi, Dr. Jacqueline Faris, Dr. Shatima, all protocols observed. I bring you greetings from the board and staff of TrustAfrica. We are a Pan-African foundation whose sole ambition is to contribute to the efforts to advance democratic governance and equitable development on the African continent. Our main focus is on responsible citizenship and accountable leadership in the search for solutions to the pressing problems that our continent is faced with. So it was with great pleasure that we accepted to partner with the Shehu Musa Yar'Adua Foundation, the Olusegun Obasanjo Presidential Library, and the Ford Foundation in organizing this summit. Ford Foundation occupies a special position in the history of TrustAfrica because it's where TrustAfrica was incubated. But it's also with humility that I make the comments that I'm going to make here today, because one of the things I think I have learned for having worked so many years with the research community of Africa as executive coordinator, but also with the civics, social movements and civil society as director of TrustAfrica, is that there are no easy solutions. And we should claim no easy victories, as Amilcar Cabral would say. And the victories can be reversed. This is what we have observed also. That's why we are talking about backsliding democracy or a shrinking civic space in some instances. TrustAfrica is based in Senegal, a country where 2 months ago, a new government led by one of Africa's youngest elected presidents was elected on the promise of bringing about what they call systemic change. You will hear more about that in the panel this afternoon when Aliou Sane and Papa Bassen speak on the different two panels. But the system that the people have issues with in Senegal is not democracy as such. So I completely agree with my senior brother, Jima Boadi, Professor Boadi, in what he was saying. People don't have issues with democracy as such. What they have issues with is the complex set of factors and processes and mechanisms that make democracy fail to work as it ought to be working. But also because democracy is not delivering on the economic promise that it also makes. So in addition to the supply issues that Professor Boadi has spoken to eloquently, I will point out 2 or 3 things which we must pay attention to. The first one is the issue of broadening and deepening genuine participation. We have demographic majorities on this continent, the youth and the young people, the young people and the women. Young people are 2/3 of almost every African population you look at, and the women are in the majority in most instances, who are political minorities. The democratic majorities are political minorities because they're kept on the margins of the political systems, basically. They don't weigh for much in terms of the decisions that are made. And I think that's an issue that ought to be addressed. According to the Mo Ibrahim Foundation report on the implementation of Agenda 2063, I quote, "Though progress is being made, women's political representation remains the lowest scoring indicator in their index on gender and at the continental level. And the African average of representation of women in the judiciary and on the other hand has also been declining since the start of the implementation of Agenda 2063. So there is an issue here. We cannot continue to have 2/3 of the populations of our continent really being on the margins of the political system. And within that, there is also special categories. There are special categories that we tend to overlook. I'm talking about all the people who experience discrimination based on descent and the kind of work they engage in. People of slave origin, it is a large number of people who are concerned. People of low caste, people who are of different orientations, experiencing disabilities. So there are categories of our populations who are not benefiting sufficiently or not being paid attention to sufficiently. Now, there is therefore a need to deepen to deliver on the political and economic goods that it is supposed to be delivering. Therefore, as the vice chair of the Yar'Adua Foundation board has been saying, it's not improving the quality of life of the people, basically. And that's a result of a number of factors. So even where it is working, there are issues that have to be addressed. And so I think the important thing to pay attention to is that why are the issues of systemic change attractive? Why are the military governments military groups taking power in some of the countries in our own region being celebrated by large numbers of young people? It is, I believe, because of the conditions of living in most of these countries. So those issues ought to be addressed. And many of these issues are actually of an economic nature. And that is the underbelly of our democratic systems, which is very soft, which is where there's a real challenge that we have to address. So I'll just conclude, because I've been given only 3 minutes, and say 2 or 3 things. One, I think we need to reimagine and reinvent governance in our countries and make them really radically reimagine governance, taking into account this factor, and that is the fact that we have populations that are in the majority made up of young people. You've had Ms. Moyo today. Meet them where they are, speak to them in their own languages, get their views and perspectives on what is happening, and take them seriously. And of the women, of course. And so I think we need to reimagine governance and make it work for these people, for these categories, and get them involved in it. Secondly, we need to look at democracy as an ecosystem. And all the different building blocks, constituent elements of that ecosystem are important. Thirdly, I think there are, there's an article in the New York Times a few months ago, but it speaks to a report that was published by the Mo Ibrahim Foundation much earlier that says that the future is African. The future is African. This continent will be the home to the largest number of people. So by the year 2050 or so, 1 out of every 4 people who meet on planet Earth will be African or of African descent. And that has significant consequences for us. And I think we need to take that into account in what we do, preparing for the future, particularly if you take into account the fact that the majority of those people will be young people again. So it needs, therefore, a reimagination of the governance systems, a reimagination of even global governance and its reinvention. And of course, the final point is, what do our regional organizations do in that context? ECOWAS and the African Union have been challenged in big ways. And I think there's a need to be really, really imaginative in dealing with these challenges that are objective, that are around with us, and make sure that we bring back into our regional organizations the countries that are tempted to look elsewhere. Because the salvation and the future of this continent is in its unity and in the implementation of, I believe, Agenda 2063. I think at least the vision that has been that's carrying Agenda 2063. Let me end my observations here, and thank you again for hosting us, and thank you all for honoring us with your presence and for giving us the opportunity, Amara and Dr. Faris, for working with the foundation.